Alright guys, so here's our next project for the day. It's very similar to one that I've done before. It's an adapter for drilling machine, foundation drilling machine. Basically it goes from a larger diameter square onto a smaller size. And as I mentioned before, it's very similar to a ratchet extension adapter to go from, let's say, 3/8 to quarter. So it's a very similar instance. And so here's where the importance of watching the cracks or developing cracks is very important. This guy ended up just tearing off from being like that, and so I'm sure at one point it had some hairline little cracks that they just didn't pay attention to, and sure enough it just snapped right off. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually try and see a few different processes of removing this weld. I'm going to be using the arc gouging process, I'm going to be using the plasma gouging process, and then I'm going to go ahead and use a torch scarfing tip to remove a section of these, and that way you guys can determine what is best for you. I personally like arc gouging. For me it's faster, or even with the torch. The torch seems to work really well because it'll preheat this piece for me. Of course arc gouging itself will preheat, and so will the plasma, but when you have a direct flame on it, it does it much faster. So that, and we will see what we can do here. I may just have to cut this guy flush right in this area to prevent any more spider cracks from entering this way. One thing I will have to be cautious with though is that these auger, I guess the insert is really close to about 10 inches, so hopefully I don't run out of room so I can have enough material to weld. So I'll find out. I'll see what we can do here. Maybe I'll just bevel this piece, or who knows. This is always a new challenge each time something shows up. So let's get started with this. Before I get started, one of the things that it does look like, this is the parent metal, of course, for this part of the box. It looks like they basically just cut the piece flush like this to say, and just weld it around it, and then created, maybe a 7/8 or 1 inch weld on here. Now what I may end up being able to do is I may end up being able to put a bevel right in this area to where it connects with this area here, and hopefully it'll do away with all these possible little cracks in here. So again, this is all something that we will find out, and the benefit to doing it that way is it'll have more actual weld. Here you can see that it just tore the material, and it worked out all right, I mean, for as long as it did, but it would have been nice to have more weld in the center of this, so at least this time we'll have a bevel. So all right, now we can get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to try here is the plasma gouging. This one's the hypertherm sink. These are cartridges that come on here. They already know what they're supposed to do when you plug them in, so the machine will change the settings for you, and hit the trigger and kind of sets it up, and it's ready to go now. This is the power level. That's what's neat about the new sinks. You can change the power level on it. And in this instance, we're gonna go ahead and do 85 amps. So let me clean this up a little bit, brush it up, and then we'll start gouging these off in that manner. They were pretty good. All right, so this is actually working a little better than I thought. Really aggressive, but it could be in the sense that I've got the amperage set too high. So I'm going to back it down a little bit and see if I can clean that up a little bit more. This is nice and it's preheated pretty warm. I'm trying to do some type of pattern or so to kind of make sure I can wash all this stuff off flat. But you know, I'm very new to plasma gouging, so you know, I'd rather art gouge. But anyway, it's working good. So I'll do this side and this side with the plasma, and then this side with the art gouging to show you, and then this side with the torch, just to see which works for you guys. But I'm actually pretty impressed. This works out pretty good. And of course, it's, like I said, it's not really flat, but that's okay. It's clean, so that's nice. And you can just weld right over that, clean it up a little bit with the grinder. So let's keep going. What a crazy mess. So that's those two sides, and I gotta say that's actually pretty good. That's a little bit better than I had hoped for. It's kind of hard to see. I mean, it's pretty flat. This one came out obviously a little bit better. One of the things I was having difficulties with is the arc coming out of the end of this thing. You know, it varied depending on your angle. It varied from maybe a ½ inch to almost 1.25 inches or 1.125 inches. And it was hard to determine, or it was hard for me, you know, maybe you guys are good at it, but it was hard for me to see the end of where that puddle was melting away. So it took a little bit of adjusting. You know, this is a very good process for what it is. It did a fantastic job here. I just got a little aggressive there, a little bit lower than, oh, not that much, but a little lower than the surface parent metal, but it looks good. This is pretty flush to the top. And so now I'm gonna do the art gouging process with this section right here, and I'll show you guys. I'm able to steer that a little bit better because the arc is a lot shorter. So let me get that set up and do that next. Okay, so hopefully you can see this screen here. There you go, a little bit better angle there. So I'm gonna be using this HCP machine for the gouging. What we need to do here now though is set it to the gouging mode. So this is the button right there. It says turn CAC on. So I turned that on. Now it's set for the 125 amps, but we're gonna go a little bit higher. We're gonna go to about 195 amps for 1/4 inch rods. And so I think we are good there. So let's go do that. All right, so this is the Profax model art gouger that I like to use. This particular one is a 3000-1, and the -1 denotes a swivel, so that really frees up a lot of dexterity. And you see my little repairs there, but it's held up a really long time. So neat machine, neat unit. Is you see here, it's local to Texas. They're made here, not there, as as some people say, but these guys are out of the Houston area, so it was rather close to me. So I will be using 1/4" carbons, and we'll be removing this spot here, so let's get after it. Not bad there, so let's keep going. It's coming out all right. If you notice here, they got some pinholes there in the welds that were hidden. And you know, realistically, a lot of these welds do have pinholes and little imperfections. Now, I normally don't stress over them too much. Now, if you're doing something that's you know, high pressure and needs to beat a code, then understandable, right? But you know, this is equipment. There's pinholes there. That wasn't the cause of the problem, and so you know, it'll be fine. You do run across situations where you may have a lot of pinholes because you're stuck underneath a machine and welding in the dirt and welding in the grease. That's just part of it. You can only clean things so much, so don't stress about it if you end up getting some of that out in the field. So that's looking really good. I'll continue on with arc gouging and get that as flush as I can, and we'll do the other side with the torch. So that looked pretty good now. It stayed up nice and flat. Semi-flat, enough to get it with a grinder, maybe a flap disc. All that's left is to do this section here with a torch. So let me set that up for you and see the difference in between those other processes. Okay, so this is a torch I'm going to use. It has a curved tip. Some people call them scarfing tips, and there are other rivet buster tips, or some that are flat, a couple different shapes. So this will work good. I'll just be erasing this here in that manner. One of the things that that happened right now is that actually I went to lunch. Went to lunch and this actually cooled off a little bit too much, so I can touch it without a problem. So that may give me a little bit of difficulty starting, but other than that, it's no big deal. It'll just continue on where we left off. So let's get this fired up. Oh, and the pressures that I run, you can normally back down the pressures, you know, in 20 to 30 range, maybe even 40 on the oxygen side, so you can control the puddle as you're melting it away. But I just leave it at my regular settings and feather it with my thumb very delicately. So let's get this started. Now I could have used a regular torch tip, at least for this upper half, but I needed to get some of that washed away before I get too low. So I just used it like you would of a normal torch. Okay, so as you saw there, man, I really gouged into those spots pretty bad. And believe it or not, as good as I am with a torch on regular cutting, I'm not so good at scarfing. I would rather arc gouge and maybe even plasma gouge, because that came out pretty slick too. So that's good enough for what it is. Just I'll grind that smooth, and that'll be ready for the piece to be welded on. All these little gouges and stuff, you don't need to grind them smooth, just as long as there's no slag buildup, something that can create porosity or an incomplete fusion. So I'll clean it up and I'll start working on the other piece here in a second. Okay, so that's about as clean as it's gonna look. This is about as flat as it's gonna get to the parent metal right there. Like I mentioned, I did dig a little deeper, but you don't tell anybody, I won't tell anybody. All right, so the next step is here to, let me see, can you see that? I think I'm gonna use the plasma actually to put a bevel on those corners. And the reason plasma over anything else is because plasma will create an electric arc, which will arc, you know, over cracks and miscellaneous little things that could hold up a torch. Sometimes when you're cutting on one section that's preheated enough and you hit another section that's got a crack in between there, it won't heat up the opposite side and it can mess you up. So you'll see what I mean as I start cutting this. So let's do that next. Alright, so that came out alright there. Did some bevels with the plasma cutter. Granted, the plasma cutter, the air jet gets deflected the further away it gets, and so it has kind of a radius type of bevel, and it did okay, but I don't like it, so I'm gonna go back and use a torch. But no, something that I'm better at. So I'm gonna remark these lines. I didn't have any lines to begin with. I'm gonna mark some lines all the way around the perimeter of this here so that I have a nice bevel all the way around, at least a good square line, and just hit it again with a torch. Now that it's hot, it should cut easy, so let me mark it up and get that cut. A lot of you guys asked where I got this tool from the other video that I put out. This is a Husky universal square. It's pretty slick. I got it off of a buddy of mine. He's no longer with us. But either way, it works really good. So let me mark that up. That's pretty close. Well, not bad. Had a couple of spots that need to be changed up a little bit. Now, it does look like the square is going to be off to one side more than the other. So I'm going to have to see if I can fix that up first. Ah, that is hot. As I mentioned earlier, there's some cracks that developed and made it more difficult for me to cut with a torch, but we'll figure it out. It's no big deal. Okay, so let me see. Can it focus? I don't think it can focus. Let's see. All right. So that's about as good as I can get it. It kind of ended up in the center, somewhat. It's crazy hot. I was hoping not to completely sharpen it to a point. I was hoping to have some kind of landing. So I actually may try and put it in the saw and create a little bit of a landing, maybe 3/4 inch or 1 inch square. I hope I don't ruin my saw because this is harder material. So I'm gonna try and cut it while it's still hot and see what happens. So we'll have to see. So let's go cut it. Okay, well that worked. I was a little unsure. I was worried that it was going to ruin my blade. So that's a pretty decent bevel all the way around. It gives it a nice square surface to stand it up onto the end of that guy right there. So now I can just clean up these edges with the grinder and start welding. Let me do that. Okay, so that looks close enough. All right, this is the inner square that there. It's not, of course, it's not straight or completely square, but that's what these lines will help with. I'll be able to see kind of the outer perimeter. So that's plenty warm. I know that guy's warm, so let me stand it up there and tack it. Okay, so we're getting there. I don't know if you can see that. So from here, I'll have another pass here, and obviously another pass there, and then so it's 1, 2, maybe 2 there, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 passes overall on this side, so 24 all the way around. You know, overall, right? So things are looking okay. This guy is nice and hot now, so that should be good. A lot of people mentioned that you shouldn't be doing this with solid wire, but I've had real good success with it. I don't know why people say that, but maybe the fact that I'm peening it in between with the needle scaler helps relieve some of the stress. I don't know, but it works for me, so I'm going to continue with what I know. I do have some dual shield, but I don't have the tips, so it's just one of those things. I was going to try and use the dual shield wire on this to show you guys some of that, because that's rather new to me. But we're going to continue on with what I know, and what I know works. Now the spots that are low, I don't know that I'll fix them. This should be okay, so long as I put a decent weld right in this area. It should be all right. I guess one of the more important things once we do get done welding it is to make sure that it cools off slowly. So I got a fire blanket that we'll just wrap around this whole neck area here and let it cool off. And so that way it has the best chance for success. So let me continue on. We're almost there. Little progress update. Looking good. Need to fill that in, of course. Another pass right in here, and hopefully I can get it pretty close to flush. That way these next set of passes will be my last ones. Don't actually know quite yet, but things are looking all right. You can't really tell, but right in this area here were some of the low spots that I gouged too much. I think with the first time I used the plasma cutter as a gouger, so I filled those in, so that's good. And things are looking all right. Gotta keep trucking. All right, look at there. It's about as good as I can get it, so that will do just fine. Came out pretty nice. I didn't get to check the temperature on it. 365, 350, 340. Hot enough. Okay, so let me just wrap this up and that should do it. I got this all beat up fire blanket, but things are looking good. So we'll let it cool off and see what it looks like in the morning. Let's wrap it up. All right, well, that should do it. I guess I don't know that I'll show you a picture in the morning because it doesn't make any sense. It just looks the same as it did today. So I think that'll do it. Oh, I forgot to mention how hot Well, you can't see it, but it says 27 volts and 602 inches per minute on my 030 solid wire. So hopefully you learned something. You know, ultimately also on the gouging, I think I would have just arc gouged it. Plasma was fast. I just couldn't see the end of the arc where it was feathering out, and I'm used to gouging with the arc gouger. So I just thought I'd show you guys different options. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we will catch you guys on the next one.